Good evening, all of you. We are beginning for another UGC NET English PYQ discussion session. I hope all of you are preparing well for the coming UGC NET exam. So today's session, we are specifically focusing on certain issues, certain important PYQs. We are discussing from different topics, including British literature, Indian literature, literary theory, and criticism. So first of all, let me give you an overview of where do we focus from British literature and how do we prepare our strategy for UGC NET English. So first of all, you have to understand that there are different periods in British literature. There is an Old English period which spans from 450 to 1066. So it's a 500 century long time, and which includes major works like Beowulf, Caedmon, and figures like so many ancient poets. So, and the second period includes medieval period, which starts from 1066 to 1485, roughly around up to 15th century. The major figure in that period is, of course, Geoffrey Chaucer, the father of English literature, and his major works, Canterbury Tales, which we have to specifically focus its themes, story, and its characters and everything. And the next period is the Renaissance period, which is roughly around 1485 to 1660. Major figures include, of course, Shakespeare, then Spenser, Marlowe, Sidney, John Donne, Milton. So there are so many important figures. And the next important period is the Restoration period, which starts from 1660 to 1700. Major figures include John Dryden, Samuel Pepys, Bunyan, and their heroic couplet. All these things should be studied. And in the 18th century, there is Alexander Pope and Jonathan Swift, Samuel Johnson, Henry Fielding, Samuel Richardson, Thomas Sterne. There are so many figures in 18th century. In the Romantic period, which spans from 1785 to 1830, there are so many important figures like William Blake, Wordsworth, Samuel Coleridge, John Keats, Shelley, Byron, and the Victorian period, roughly from 1830 to 1901, in figures including Charles Dickens, George Eliot, Tennyson, Browning, Thomas Hardy. And in the modern period, we have to focus on uh, important writers: T.S. Eliot, Woolf, Virginia Woolf, James Joyce, D.H. Lawrence, W.B. Yeats, Foster, Samuel Beckett. So these are the periods we are specifically focusing from British literature, and we have to expect questions from all these periods, which its time spans across different centuries. So first of all, let's begin with some major questions. This question is from the Puritan period, and it is specifically about John Milton's Paradise Lost. The question is, what is the central theme of Paradise Lost? There are four options: the fall of Troy, the fall of man, the quest for virtue, the nature for poetry. So the correct answer is the fall of man or Satan's rebellion. So these are the two possible answers: the fall of man or Satan's rebellion. Let us look at the explanation. John Milton wrote Paradise Lost in 1667, an epic in 12 books. That is important. The Paradise Lost spans across 12 books, and its central theme is the fall of man, Satan's revolt against God, Adam and Eve's disobedience, the humanity's loss of paradise. It follows the classical epic convention: invocation of muse in medias res, and Milton's Satan is one of the most complex characters in English literature. So we have to remember all these points related to Paradise Lost. It has 12 books, and John Milton published it in 1667. And there are different. The central theme is, of course, can be called as fall of man, and Satan's revolt, Adam and Eve's disobedience. All these can be the answer for the question, the central theme of Paradise Lost. Remember that this is an important work. Every aspect of this work can be a question for UGC NET English. Okay. Now we can go to the second question. The Canterbury Tales is written in which verse form primarily? Is the second question. There are four options: blank verse, heroic couplets, Spenserian stanza, terza rhyme. The answer is heroic couplets, rhymed iambic pentameter. That is, the meter is also important. There may be question that can be asked specifically about the meter of Canterbury Tales. So heroic couplet, Canterbury Tales written in heroic couplets, and its rhyming scheme is iambic pentameter. These are the two important points, and we can just look at the explanation. Geoffrey Chaucer used heroic couplets, pairs of rhymed lines in iambic pentameter for most of the Canterbury Tales. The Knight's Tale, General Prologue, and others follow this form. The Tale of Sir Thopas uses tail rhyme stanza as a parody. Chaucer is the father of English literature and contributed to legitimizing Middle English. That's also an important thing. Chaucer is known as the father of English literature, and he formed the very structure of Middle English language. So actually, through Canterbury Tales, English language gets its prominence as a literary language, and it is structured like a literary language through Canterbury Tales. And Geoffrey Chaucer, in such a way, is the major contributor who formed such a language like English in its structured, systematic form. So remember, Canterbury Tales has an important position in English uh, literary history, and the man Geoffrey Chaucer is an important figure in British literature. So remember, all the aspects of Canterbury Tales can be a major question for UGC NET English exam point of view. So we have to study the characters, the theme, all the stories, all from Canterbury Tales. Its publication date is important, and Geoffrey Chaucer's other minor works are also important from NET exam point of view. At least we have to study the titles of Geoffrey Chaucer's minor works as well. Okay. The next question, which of the following is not one of Shakespeare's four great tragedies? There are four options: Hamlet, Macbeth, Richard II, King Lear. So check the question, which of the following is not one of Shakespeare's four great tragedies? Of course, Hamlet is an important tragedy of Shakespeare. Macbeth is also a tragedy, and King Lear is also most celebrated tragedy of Shakespeare. So the answer is Richard II, because Shakespeare's four great tragedies are Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, and Macbeth, all written between 1600 and 1606. And Richard II is a history play, not a tragedy in the Aristotelian sense. Other notable tragedies include Antony and Cleopatra, Timon of Athens, and Coriolanus. So, UGC NET often tests the classification of Shakespearean plays. Remember that. So, we need to know what are the tragedies of Shakespeare's and what are the historical plays, what are the problem plays, what are the comedies. All these things should be studied separately for UGC NET exam. So, remember, Richard II is a historical play, not a tragedy by William Shakespeare. Hamlet, Macbeth, King Lear, and Othello are the major great tragedies of William Shakespeare. Remember that. Now we can go to the next question. The question is, negative capability is a concept associated with which romantic poet? William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, John Keats, P.B. Shelley. The answer is John Keats, because John Keats coined the term negative capability in an 1817 letter to his brothers, the ability to remain in uncertainty and doubt without irritably reaching after fact and reason. Wordsworth defined poetry as emotion recollected in tranquility in preface to lyrical ballads. Coleridge distinguished fancy from imagination. Shelley called poets unacknowledged legislators of the world in a defense of poetry. So these are the major concepts of different romantic poets. So remember, John Keats coined the term negative capability. It is called, the term is used to called the ability to remain in uncertainty and doubt without irritably reaching after the fact and reason. So, what is negative? When the question asks what is negative capability, remember that it is the ability to remain the uncertainty and doubt without irritably reaching after the fact and reason. And there are some important concepts of other romantic poets. Wordsworth's concept is emotional tranquility and layman's language. And Coleridge's main idea is of the difference between fancy and imagination. And Shelley called the poets as the unacknowledged legislators of the world. Remember these points. Next question: which technique is primarily associated with Virginia Woolf's narrative style? Omniscient third-person narrative, stream of consciousness, epistolary narration, magic realism. Of course, it is stream of consciousness. Because most of Virginia Woolf's novel written in using the technique of stream of consciousness. Virginia Woolf pioneered the stream of consciousness technique in novels like Mrs. Dalloway to the Lighthouse and The Waves. This technique represents the fluid, continuous flow of characters' inner thought. James Joyce, William Faulkner, and Dorothy Richardson also used this method. Woolf's essay like Modern Fiction and A Room of One's Own are critical landmarks in modern history, as well as uh, in terms of the use of the technique stream of consciousness. Okay. Next, the concept of objective correlative was introduced by I.A. Richards in Practical Criticism. The Farley is in the great tradition. T.S. Eliot in Hamlet and His Problems. William Emerson in Seven Types of Ambiguity. The correct answer is T.S. Eliot in Hamlet and His Problems. T.S. Eliot introduced objective correlation in his 1919 essay, Hamlet and His Problems. He defined it as a set of objects, a situation, a chain of events which shall be the formula of a particular emotion, so that when the external facts are given, the emotion is immediately evoked. Eliot criticized Hamlet's emotion as excessive compared to the facts, calling it an artistic failure. This is a high frequency net concept. So remember, T.S. Eliot criticized the narrative technique used by Shakespeare in Hamlet. So, Eliot formulated the concept of objective correlation, and that concept is introduced in the essay Hamlet and His Problems. And Eliot find out some certain severe mistakes in terms of objective reality in the play The Hamlet. Okay. So remember, all the critical works of T.S. Eliot is important as well as his poems. Okay. Now we can move to the next session. So we have discussed so far around 5 questions from British literature. Now we can move on to Indian literature in English. So remember, there are some important writers in Indian English literature: R.K. Narayan, Mulkraj Anand, Salman Rushdie, Rabindranath Tagore, Raja Rao, Arundhati Roy. These are the main important writers, and we will look at the questions of the possible questions of text from these writers. Okay. So remember, R.K. Narayan's important works are Malgudi Days, The Guide, Sami and Friends, The English Teacher. You have to remember all the characters from all these works and the main storyline of this work. Okay. And Rabindranath Tagore's important works are Gitanjali, The Home and the World, Gora, The Post Office. Okay. Mulkiraj Anand's important works are Untouchable, Coolie, Across the Black Waters. Raja Rao's works are Kantapura, The Serpent of the Rock, Comrade Kirillov. And Salman Rushdie's important works are Midnight's Children, Shame, The Moon's Last Sight. And Arundhati Roy's works are The God of Small Things, The Ministry of Utmost Happiness. So remember, from these writers, Tagore got Nobel Prize for Literature in 1913. and this year is also known as the Renaissance of Bengali literature in Indian English, in Indian literature. Okay, and Salman Rushdie is of course known for his magical realism and his post-colonial themes, and Arundhati Roy is known for her Marxist feminist approach to literary text. Okay, and her writings are commonly known as lyrical prose because that is such a musical way she writes most of her works. So, just look at the first question in Indian English literature. In Midnight's Children, the protagonist Salim Sinai's birth coincides with India's independence in August 15, 1947. So Salim Sinai is the protagonist in the novel Midnight's Children, and his birth coincides with the India's independence. Okay. Salman Rushdie's Midnight Children uses the birth of Salim Sinai at the exact moment of India's independence as its central metaphor. The 1001 Midnight Children born in that first hour have supernatural powers. The novel uses magic realism and allegory to critique post-independence India. It won the Booker Prize and Booker of Bookers for the same novel. So that is important. Midnight's Children. The novel Midnight's Children got two Booker Prize. One, the Booker Prize in 1981, and the second one, the Booker of Bookers, which was in 1993 and 2008. So remember, all the characters in Midnight's Children are important, and the storyline is important, and the very character, the protagonist Selim Sinai, is also an important uh, in terms of UGC NET English perspective. Now, next question. Raja Rao's Kantabura is notable for its narrative technique. First person male narrator in colonial Bombay, Salapurana narrated by an old village woman, stream of consciousness, unreliable narrator in an epistolary form. The answer is B. Salapurana narrated by an old woman. Kandapura is an important novel written by Raja Rao, and its narrative technique, its theme, its storyline, characters all are important. Salapurana is the narrative technique used by Raja Rao in Kandapura. Remember that. Raja Rao's Kandapura uses the Salapurana tradition narrated by Achekka, an important character, an old Brahmin woman. This narrative voice lends the novel its rhythm, which Rao described in his famous foreword as the tempo of an Indian life. The novel portrays Gandhi's freedom struggle in a South Indian village. Rao's foreword itself a key text on the question of writing Indian experience in English. Now let's move on to literary theory and criticism. Remember, there are some important schools and theoretical movements in literary theory: structuralism, post-structuralism, deconstruction, psychoanalytic, Marxist criticism, feminist theory, and post-colonialism. Major theorists in structuralism are Saussure, Lévi-Strauss, Roland Barthes, Roman Jakobson, and deconstruction major theorists are Jacques Derrida, Paul Tiemann, J. Hillis Miller. In psychoanalytics, major theorists are Sigmund Freud, Lacan, Kristeva, Harold Bloom. In Marxian criticism, there are important figures Karl Marx, Louis Althusser, Gramsci, Tori Eagleton. In feminist theory, Virginia Woolf, Simone de Beauvoir, Showalter, Sixu, Eudigere. These are the important figures in feminist theory. And in post-colonial theory, important theorists are Edward Said, Gayatri Spivak, Homi Bhabha, Franz Fanon. Okay, and remember, we have to study specifically on certain concepts, its ideas, its themes in related to literary theory and criticism. In structuralism, you must have to study language as a system of sign. What is a system of sign and binary oppositions, lang versus parole? This concept should be studied. In deconstruction, logocentrism, difference, trace, aporia, subtemen, binary hierarchies, subverted. All these concepts should be studied. In psychoanalytic, we have to study Oedipus complex, mirror stage, uncanny, anxiety of inference. In base structure, in Marxist criticism, base structure, superstructure, ideology, hegemony, cultural materialism, all these concepts should be studied because we have to expect questions from all these concepts. And in feminist theory, there is gynocratism, acculture femina, and the male gaze, gender as performance. All these theories and concepts are important. In post-colonialism, Orientalism, subaltern, mimicry, hybridity, ambivalence, colonial discourse, all these concepts are important. Okay, now we can move on to questions. First question, Ferdinand de Saussure distinguished between Lang and Perot. What do these terms mean? Answer, Lang is the abstract language system. Perot is the individual speech act. Remember, Lang is the abstract language system and Parole is the individual speech act, individual utterance of the each language. Okay. So this Ferdinand de Saussure's course in general linguistics, that's an important work. In that work, he distinguishes Lang, the abstract collective linguistic system shared by humanity, from Parole, the concrete individual use of language. He also distinguished the signifier, which means the sound image, from the signified, which means the concept, and argued that the relationship is arbitrary. So that's also important. The relation between the signifier and the signified is arbitrary. This binary thinking became foundational to structuralism and influenced Levi-Strauss, Roland Barthes, Jacobson, and later Jacques Derrida. So these concepts are important. What is Lang? What is Parole? And what is sign system? What is signifier? What is signified? Questions can be expected from all these areas. Okay. Next, Edward Said's Orientalism argues that the Orient is a Western discursive construction that serves colonial power. Okay, the answer is the Orient is a Western discursive construction that serves colonial power. Edward Said argues, drawing on Foucault's discourse theory, that Orientalism is a discourse, a system of knowledge through which the West constructed the East as exotic, backward, feminine, and irrational, justifying colonial domination. It is not a neutral description, but a power-laden representation. Said's other work, he works The Word, the Text, the Critic, published in 1983. Culture and Imperialism, published in 1993. Baba's concept of mimicry, hybridity, and ambivalence extend Said's concept. So important, Edward Said's important critical work is Orientalism, and the other two works are The World, the Text, and the Critic, and the other work is Culture and Imperialism. All his works are, and his publication year, all are important. And the main concept is the concept of Orient, and how the West construct Orient is important in terms of post-colonial criticism. Okay, so remember, Edward Said used his concept from Michel Foucault's idea of power, knowledge, and discourse. Okay. We can look at another question from theory. Gayatri Spivak's famous question, can the subaltern speak, argues that the subaltern, especially the colonial woman, cannot speak within existing discourse. Okay. There are four options. Subalterns can speak freely in post-colonial democracies. Intellectuals should let subalterns represent themselves. Subaltern literature is the most authentic form of post-colonial writing, and subaltern, especially the colonial woman, cannot speak within existing discourse. So the answer is the subaltern cannot speak in existing discourse. In her landmark essay, Gayatri Spivak argues that the subaltern, particularly the colonized woman, is doubly silenced by colonial and patriarchal structures. Western intellectuals, even when claiming to represent subaltern, re-inscribe their silencing. Spivak uses Vineshri Baduri's suicide as a case study. She translated Derrida's of climatology and her key work, A Critique of Postcolonialism. So these are important points. Remember, Spivak uh, uses the character or the real life personality Bhuvaneshwari Badri and her suicide as a case study to denote how the subaltern is silenced in discourses during and after the post-colonial period. So, and another important point we have to remember that the idea, the term subaltern is actually coined by Antonio Gramsci, an Italian Marxian thinker, not by Gayatri Spivak. Gayatri Spivak took this term from Gramsci and used it in her essay, How the Subaltern is Silenced by the Colonial Elite, and like after the independence, how the post-colonial elite is silencing the subaltern people in the society. So remember, all these points, all these terms are very important. Okay. Now, in terms of literary criticism, we have to focus on certain key concepts. Aristotle's poetics, in there he describes about mimesis, catharsis, commercia, unity of action, time, place, six elements of tragedy. These are important. In Plato, the Republic, poetry as Christ removed from reality. This concept is important. And in Longinus, concept of sublimity is important. Philip Sidney's Apology for Poetry is an important critical work. Samuel Johnson's Life of the Poets, Preface to Shakespeare are important works. Matthew Arnold, The Function of Criticism, Culture and Anarchy are important works. Matthew Arnold is a Victorian figure. He is also a important literary critical figure. He wrote poems as well. And I.R. Richards, an important figure. His ideas of practical criticism, principles of literary theory, principles of literary criticism are important. His idea of close reading is important. Parley's great tradition and revaluation, all these things are important. Great tradition in English novels like Austen's, Eliot's, James, Conrad's, Lawrence, and moral seriousness is what Parley is focused in his critical works. So in literary criticism, we can look at certain questions as well. Aristotle's concept of catharsis is, in tragedy refers to the purgation of pity and fear in the audience. Okay, catharsis it means purging or purgation or purification. We can go to next question. The concept of intentional fallacy was proposed by W.K. Wimsatt and Monroe Beardsley. That's important. Intentional fallacy was propounded by Wimsatt and Beardsley. And there is also another concept called affective fallacy. And in intentional fallacy is an error of judging a poem by the author's stated intention. In affective fallacy is a judging a poem by its emotional effect on the reader. So these are two critical errors in scholarship or critical reading. And Showalter's term gynocriticism refers to the study of women as writers or female creativity and female literary tradition. Now, another question. Mikhail Bakhtin's concept of heteroglossia refers to the diversity of social voices and languages within a novel. Okay. Northrop Frye's Anatomy of Criticism classifies literature using four narrative archetypes based on seasonal cycles: comedy, romance, tragedy, irony, and satire. Francois Lyotard defined postmodernism as incredulity towards grand narratives of progress and liberation. Modernism celebrates grand narratives and postmodernism celebrates little narratives. It's an important point. The term eco-criticism was popularized by which critics were? It was popularized in Claude Fleece and Lawrence Bulls. Both are foundational. Eco-criticism examines relations between literature and physical environment, and their work eco-criticism readers systematized the field. So these two writers' works are important: Environmental Imagination and the Association for the Study of Literature and Environment was founded in 1992. The year is important. And key concepts like bio-regionalism, nature writing, pastoral tradition, post-humanism, all these are important from a net point of view. So with this, we can stop now and we can see in the next session. Thank you.